Hello, all. Something really interesting happened. I'm pretty active in a few online fora, and I run a group uh, called Vintage Flex Fountain Pens on Facebook, and I'm in a pen club, and I go to the shows and stuff, and it's just really interesting. I've had so many conversations with people, and I realize there's a lot of stuff that I never talk about that never gets said that probably should get said. There are a lot of really fascinating questions that kind of intersect all of these things. And I did a post a while ago that a number of people completely misunderstood. Like they just didn't get it at all. And I was absolutely stunned. So I felt like I have to make a video kind of explaining this because there's so much here. And it really gets to the heart of what makes these old fountain pens so darn interesting. It's a part of it. It's only a part of it. Uh, but it's a good example of how much can be contained in one place. One of the things that interests me, of course, is old writing. And of course you watch this stuff, you care about it, so you know that. But part of that is also seeing how seeing how people actually wrote 120 years ago, or 140 or 180 or even 80 years ago, or whenever and wherever they wrote. And part of that is collecting this stuff, this old writing, which is something I've done for many years since the 1980s. But unfortunately, a lot of that stuff I don't know where it ended up. I can't find it because I moved a lot, and a lot of it was kept at my mom and dad's house, and mom had a proclivity for throwing stuff away. Not good. Anyway, so I went to one of the few halfway decent antique shops around, and I kind of went rummaging through their stuff for some interesting things with great writing on them. And I have a thing for good postcards. Good postcards are actually interesting. Blank ones that are modern, that are photographs only of the label of a bottle of Tide, you know, laundry detergent, are not interesting unless you recontextualize them and make them ironic or something. But otherwise, that's just not too interesting. Or a photo of a wooden floor, nobody cares. But if you have something that has everything in one place, like here, then you've got a real winner. So I went rummaging through their stuff, and there was a section with a handful of postcards in it called disasters, and I said, "This is going to be great." I mean, how often do you see a postcard of a disaster, right? Not often. So I found this, and I immediately see. I was looking for the handwriting, and this is fabulous. This is from 1906. All right, this is where it was received. This is where it was sent from. Okay, sent from Mount Vernon, New York, May 3rd at 7:30 p.m. in 1906. We have a canceled stamp. We've got when it was sent, when it was received. And we've got lovely, lovely writing here from someone who was probably by this time older, had developed his or her, I think it's her, handwriting, uh, certainly well within the 19th century. And this is really informative and instructive. It shows us how people actually wrote. This was probably written with a dip pen rather than a fountain pen. It's possible that it was written with a fountain pen, but it's unlikely. Partly because of the time, partly because in 1906, not many people had fountain pens. Rich people and busy business people had them, but they weren't really as common as dip pens. It wasn't until maybe actually the 20s, to be honest with you, the early 20s probably, when it was like clear that fountain pens were more common. I mean, maybe the teens. I know the lever filler became of fountain pens. The lever filling system became predominant for filling systems by 1915, but the number of people who actually used fountain pens, I don't think was I don't think it was in the majority quite yet. But anyway, so we've got the dates here. We've got the times. Now here's what the postcard is, right? It's this lovely photo of this bridge, this really cool rustic stone bridge. There's what appears to be a goose there. This could be right now. There's a boat with people in it. And this is a photograph, 1906. So it's pretty old. People are still using, horses and buggies. They don't have cars yet. There are cars, but again, you've got to be a millionaire to have a car. So the message is, has the news of the earthquake reached Putnam yet? Get off the grass. AGH. And if you read what this says, it says Stone Bridge, Stow Lake, Golden Gate Park, San Francisco, California. Destroyed by earthquake, April 18th, 1906. Now, this begs a lot of questions. First of all, this is 1906, all right? Where was this sent from? You kind of would think that it would be sent from, well, San Francisco, right? Or that area, because it's a photograph of this of this bridge in Stow Lake, or over Stow Lake in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. But here's the thing: before we go any further, and I don't want to forget this because it's really important. April 18th, 1906. This thing was mailed literally 2 weeks and 1 day later. So that's really pretty quick. The news had gotten out there. This postcard had gotten printed up. Presumably, it was an older postcard that had been printed up by some company or companies. They had the plates. And then they probably reprinted it with this addendum, because this was big news. I mean, it was huge. It was a big deal. But to even still think about it, like, how long did it take for some people to get the news in 1906? Well, if you lived in the country, it might have taken a while. We did have wire services. We did have the telegraph. We certainly had the train. It took a few days to get across the country by train. But but we were starting to get pretty modern by then. Trains were already kind of old. They'd been around for 50 years or, thereabouts, at least. So that's kind of neat that the news traveled so quickly. This is very interesting. It took literally 12 hours, 12 and a half hours to get from Mount Vernon, New York to Putnam, Connecticut. Now, let me do, that's a fair distance, by the way. I forgot to pull this up. I'm going to pull it up. But it's roughly, if we go to Google Maps and see how long that took, it's something like 2.5 hours. I'm actually not going to do it right now, but it's quite a distance. Mount Vernon is, I believe, north and west from Yonkers, and then Putnam is in the very northeast corner of Connecticut. So it's a bit of a schlep. It's a few hundred, not a few hundred miles. I don't even know how many miles it is. I should have looked it up. But it's, when there's zero traffic and you're driving, it takes 2 hours and 29 minutes. Okay. I mean, I've sent stuff across town that took more than 12 and a half hours to get there. Okay. That's pretty amazing. So obviously they had to have relied on trains and stuff to do that. But that's kind of amazing. So here we've got this postcard that's 118 years old, right? And it's got all of this stuff in it, all these questions. It's got the great handwriting. It's got the stamp. It's got the story of how long it took to get from where it was to where it ended up. It's kind of interesting. You kind of ask, why did somebody send a postcard from Mount Vernon, New York, about a place in San Francisco to Putnam, Connecticut? Well, the short answer is it was big news. It was huge. And a bunch of people were profiting from this, right? Ooh, I know, we've got a photo of that place. We'll print these things up, So it was a big thing. But it did leave us with some questions now, didn't it? And when I say us, I showed this to a friend of mine, dear old friend, who started looking up some of the stuff online. I hadn't done it yet. And we came up with some really interesting stuff. Now, like this bridge, okay? Oh, by the way, this is... the photo that I posted included this pen. because this is from about 1908. It's a little bit newer than when that postcard's from, but it's from the period. And I had written this, which is already that much older, or rather, I should say newer. Good grief. By, 118 years. So we've got this really cool thing where this pen, or a pen like this, not too dissimilar, could very well have written a postcard like this. I doubt that was the case for a couple of reasons, the reasons I just gave, but that's already pretty cool. And this is sort of my little modern spin on what these things can do. But check this out. All right, if we go to here, we've got our questions, right? This bridge. Well, we looked it up, and there it is, the rustic stone bridge, Camelot Bridge, South Stow Lake Bridge. Look at that. This is a photo, a color photo, and that doesn't look destroyed to me. So what's going on there? Huh. So that was documented in 2013. And here's a little bit about the bridge. It's an unusual bridge and is appropriately named the Rustic Stone Bridge in the Golden Gate Historic District nomination form. So that's what they called it when they applied for the, I guess, historic status or something. Much of the stone, particularly that found on the spandrel walls and the railing, is large, bulky stone and is likely of a decorative nature. There may be concrete behind much of this stone holding everything in place. It is unclear if it plays a structural role or if concrete is hidden behind providing a structural role. But the ring of the arch is composed of a more organized structure of cut stone, and it includes a larger keystone at the center. The barrel of the arch has red brick, and this does appear to play a structural role. An 1893 date stone is found in the spandrel wall, indicating when the bridge was built. The contractor for the bridge is not known. We have another cool thing here. So the bridge seems to be still intact. Well, hey, that looks like an intact bridge to me. This is an article from Medium that talks about the mystery of the Stow Lake lady, which I knew nothing about. Now, for anyone who lives in San Francisco or has friends there or has spent time there, you probably would be familiar with this. And to make a very long story short, there's a legend that there's a ghost in this lake. And it's right by this bridge. And apparently, one of the legends goes that there was a woman with 3 kids who took one of her children for a walk in the park. She stopped and chatted with a fellow person with a stroller, another mother, and they talked for a bit. And apparently, when she turned around, the stroller with the child was gone, completely gone. And then what happened? Well, she dove into the lake, and she never appeared again. And that was 16 years ago, 1908. So that's the year that this pen is from, roughly. So there's that legend there. Now, when people ask me, like, what makes fountain pens so interesting, or vintage ones, this is what makes them interesting. They're a meeting place of all of these different wonderful, fascinating things. I knew nothing about this bridge. I didn't know that it still existed. I knew nothing about that, the legend of the ghost. It's interesting that this here is mistaken. Why does it say that it was destroyed by earthquake, April 18th? Are they talking about the bridge? Are they talking about the observatory? There was an observatory next to it, apparently, that was destroyed. Maybe that's what they were talking about. I find it amazing that, in 1906, 118 years ago, they were able to get this postcard from, Mount Vernon, New York, to Putnam, Connecticut in 12 and a half hours, which is, again, quite a distance. It takes you 2.5 hours to drive on, in a modern car from, 2024 on Route I-95. That's kind of amazing to me. It's amazing to me that they were able to get this postcard printed up so quickly, that the news traveled so quickly, that it was such a big story. And in fact, over here, you've got, I just wanted to show you there's an example of exactly the same postcard that we found on eBay. But as you can see, it just does not have nearly as interesting handwriting. But this one at least has been used. And there's another stamp. And you'll also note that this one is from August. What is it? August 13th, 1909. All right. So this is 3 years later. All right. Like the news was, so big, right, that they're still sending these things out, I think that's just fascinating. And it's just really cool that, the world was changing so much so quickly at that time. You had one foot in the old world that looked like this, and you had the other foot in the future that got this postcard, that got the photograph taken, that got the postcard made, sent out. It ended up at a store somewhere. Somebody found it and wrote out the postcard and sent it off, and it was there in 12 and a half hours, over 100 and something miles. And that something like this really kind of exemplifies that fascinating meeting place where the clip here with the rivets in there, this looks like a railroad bridge. I mean, this thing looks very industrial to me. And yet you have this very Art Nouveau design for the silver overlay. That's what vintage fountain pens are to me. It's that meeting place of all those different things. So I hope you folks got something out of this, and that you end up with your own vintage fountain pen journey, because you know what? These things are fascinating. It's hey, we can't go into the future yet, and maybe that's a good thing, but we can certainly go back and triangulate a little bit and feel like we're in the future now. Thank you so much. Over and out.